Welcome back to World Brief. Tonight, political shockwaves are rippling through Washington as Congress officially launches a new investigation into former President Donald Trump's alleged $230 million fundraising scheme. The probe is already being described as one of the most consequential post-presidency scandals in modern U.S. history, a case that could expose how money, politics, and power collided in the chaotic aftermath of the 2020 election. This isn't just another partisan spat or campaign controversy. This is a federal-level inquiry into whether Donald Trump and his inner circle deceived millions of supporters into donating money under false pretenses, raising hundreds of millions of dollars under the banner of election integrity, while allegedly diverting large sums for personal and political use. And tonight, for the first time, congressional investigators are publicly acknowledging what insiders have whispered for months: the numbers don't add up. The story begins on November 4, 2020, the morning after the election. As votes were still being counted, Trump's campaign began flooding supporters with urgent fundraising emails, claiming that the election was being stolen and that their immediate financial help was needed to defend democracy and stop the fraud. But those funds, it turns out, were never primarily used for legal challenges or voter investigations. Instead, according to federal filings, the money flowed into a sprawling political network, the Save America PAC, Trump's post-election fundraising arm. Between November 2020 and early 2021, that PAC reportedly pulled in over $230 million. But here's where the story turns dark. According to investigators and campaign finance watchdogs, only a small fraction of that money actually went toward legitimate election litigation. The rest, tens of millions, allegedly went to Trump's properties, his political allies, and organizations loyal to him. Fast forward to today, congressional committees, armed with subpoena power and testimony from former aides, are now digging into exactly where the $230 million went, who authorized the spending, and whether Trump or his advisors knowingly misled donors about how their money would be used. The new probe, announced by the Bipartisan Oversight and Accountability Committee, will focus on potential violations of campaign finance laws, wire fraud statutes, and misuse of donor funds. Lawmakers say they have obtained internal emails, documents, and testimony that suggest a coordinated effort to inflate election fraud claims for profit. According to committee insiders, a key piece of evidence is a set of fundraising drafts circulated among Trump campaign officials just days after the election. These drafts allegedly show that staffers were deliberately instructed to use inflammatory language, like "fight back" and "defend the election," to boost donations. Yet, behind the scenes, several top advisors reportedly admitted they had no concrete evidence of widespread voter fraud. One former campaign digital strategist, who has now turned over documents to Congress, described the post-election operation as a cash machine built on outrage. He told investigators that every false claim, every lawsuit, every fiery press conference wasn't just about politics, it was about keeping the money flowing. That statement echoes findings from the January 6 committee 2 years ago, which first uncovered that Trump's team raised enormous sums claiming to fund the Official Election Defense Fund, a fund that, as it turned out, didn't even exist. The money instead went into Save America PAC, which later financed Trump's rallies, legal bills, and even payments to family-connected companies. Now, the new congressional investigation aims to go much deeper. Lawmakers are not just rehashing past findings, they're following the money trail to see if criminal deception occurred, and if so, who profited. Already, subpoenas have been issued to several former Trump aides, campaign consultants, and PAC accountants. Sources close to the investigation say that financial records from the period between November 2020 and January 2022 show dozens of transfers to companies linked to Trump allies, including media consultants, event planners, and legal firms that had little or nothing to do with election lawsuits. One example cited in the preliminary report: a $60,000 payment to a company run by a former Trump aide for strategic consulting, even though no clear services were rendered. Another $1 million was reportedly directed to a pro-Trump nonprofit that spent most of its funds on advertisements praising Trump rather than contesting election results. Investigators are particularly interested in whether Trump personally benefited from the PAC's funds. Several payments were made to Trump-owned properties, including Mar-a-Lago and Trump hotels, for event expenses. Critics argue those payments were a way to funnel donor money back into Trump's private businesses. The White House, meanwhile, is staying largely silent on the issue. President Biden's communications team has refused to comment directly on the new investigation, saying only that, no one is above the law. But among Democrats on Capitol Hill, the mood is far from restrained. Representative Jamie Raskin, a member of the Oversight Committee, stated bluntly, if the evidence shows that donors were intentionally misled for profit, this isn't politics, it's fraud. Republicans, however, are divided. Some Trump-aligned members are calling the investigation a politically motivated witch hunt, while others quietly admit that the financial irregularities look troubling. Even some GOP strategists privately concede that the case could damage the party heading into 2026 if it reinforces public perceptions of corruption and self-dealing. What makes this case especially explosive is how it ties directly into Trump's ongoing legal battles. The former president is already facing multiple criminal indictments, from the classified documents case in Florida to the election interference case in Washington, D.C., and this new congressional probe could add yet another layer of scrutiny to his post-presidency finances. If Congress uncovers sufficient evidence of fraud, it could refer the case to the Department of Justice for potential criminal prosecution, a move that would carry enormous political and legal implications as Trump continues to campaign for another White House term. Legal experts say the stakes couldn't be higher. Under federal law, if investigators can prove that Trump or his associates knowingly used false claims to solicit money, especially across state lines through email and text fundraising, that could constitute wire fraud, a felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. And it's not just Trump at risk. Senior figures from his campaign, including digital directors, PAC treasurers, and even legal counsel, could face liability if they participated in or knowingly approved misleading communications. One major area of focus is the Save America PAC's spending after January 6, 2021. Records show that millions of dollars raised under the election defense banner were later used to pay Trump's personal legal fees, to fund rallies, and even to support candidates loyal to him in midterm elections. Investigators are asking, how can money raised to fight fraud legally be spent years later on political rallies and personal defense? Campaign finance experts say it's a gray area, but if donor intent was clearly manipulated through false promises, prosecutors could argue it crosses into criminal territory. As the investigation expands, new witnesses are stepping forward. Some former Trump campaign staffers, perhaps sensing legal exposure, are cooperating in exchange for immunity. According to congressional sources, several of them have provided text messages and internal memos that detail how aggressive fundraising strategies were developed and tested. Those messages reportedly show that after each high-profile press conference or social media outburst about supposed election fraud, donations would spike dramatically, sometimes by millions in a single day. One former campaign official told investigators, "We knew the lawsuits were going nowhere. But as long as Trump kept talking about a stolen election, the money kept rolling in." If true, that statement could prove devastating to Trump's defense, undermining the argument that the fundraising was conducted in good faith. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team is pushing back hard. In a fiery statement released earlier today, they dismissed the probe as a desperate political stunt, and insisted that all donations were used appropriately and in accordance with the law. The statement accused Democrats of weaponizing Congress to interfere in the upcoming election, and claimed that the real goal is to silence millions of patriotic Americans who supported President Trump. Still, behind the scenes, there are signs of growing concern within Trump's camp. Sources say lawyers are bracing for possible document seizures and witness subpoenas that could expose sensitive financial information, including communications between Trump's campaign, his PAC, and outside vendors. The timing of this probe is also significant. It comes just as Trump ramps up his 2026 campaign operations, with Save America PAC continuing to play a central financial role. If the investigation results in new restrictions or penalties on that PAC, it could directly impact his campaign's funding pipeline, a potentially crippling blow. And that's precisely what worries Republican strategists, that even if Trump survives legally, the political fallout could alienate moderate voters and donors tired of the constant stream of scandals. Public opinion data already shows signs of fatigue. A recent Gallup poll found that 62% of Americans, including nearly a third of Republican respondents, believe Trump used the 2020 election controversy to enrich himself. That perception, even without criminal charges, could shape voter attitudes for years. Some observers see this as part of a broader reckoning over how political fundraising has evolved in the digital age, where emotional appeals and misinformation can generate massive profits almost instantly. Experts warn that Trump's fundraising model, if left unchecked, could become a dangerous template for future candidates looking to exploit outrage for money. And Congress seems determined to set a precedent. Lawmakers are reportedly considering new legislation that would tighten rules on political fundraising transparency, including requiring PACs to clearly disclose how donations will be used. One proposal would even make it illegal to use words like defense fund, unless the majority of money truly goes toward that purpose. But for now, the spotlight remains squarely on Trump. And as the investigation deepens, the question that hangs over Washington is simple but profound. Did a former president knowingly scam his own supporters out of $230 million? It's a question that cuts to the heart of American democracy, because if proven true, it wouldn't just be a scandal about money. It would be a scandal about trust. Trust between leaders and the people who believe in them. Political analysts say the probe could also have ripple effects beyond Trump himself. Other political committees aligned with him, from MAGA Inc. to various state-level groups, could face new scrutiny about how they handled donor money. The fear among Republicans is that what starts as one investigation could spiral into a broader audit of the entire pro-Trump fundraising ecosystem. And as the evidence mounts, even some conservative legal voices are beginning to speak out. Former federal prosecutor and Republican commentator George Conway said, "If you knowingly defraud people by telling them lies to get their money, that's not politics, that's a crime." Period. For millions of Trump's supporters, this will be hard to hear. Many still believe the 2020 election was stolen, a belief fueled by years of false claims amplified by Trump and his allies. But for others, especially independents and moderate Republicans, this investigation feels like confirmation that those post-election fundraising drives weren't about saving democracy, they were about saving Trump's finances. As Congress begins public hearings, expect dramatic revelations. Lawmakers are promising to release key evidence to the public, including emails, internal memos, and testimony from insiders who were part of the fundraising operation. Each new disclosure could reshape how Americans view not only Trump, but the entire post-election narrative that has dominated U.S. politics for the last 5 years. The stakes are enormous, for Trump, for his movement, and for American democracy itself. And as this probe unfolds, one truth remains clear: when politics and profit collide, transparency is the first casualty. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.